just to recap, let me share the screen first. Can you see my screen? Parenting is the highest calling anyone could have. We have seen a lot of good parents in our community. Many of them are not Christians, but leading our children to Jesus is the highest calling that anyone can have. And it is such a big responsibility. We're living in a very difficult time, challenging time, end times we could call. And so much have changed in the society. We went through all of it. I mean, in a very brief way, we went through some of the struggles that our generation is facing and we are facing. So in the times that we live in, what could we do to properly prepare us and our children alike? There are some foundational principles which we all should know, and this series is just covering that, and it's just a high-level overview. We don't have time to go into the depth of any of it, but there are so many books and resources and focus on the family, and Dr. James Dobson's teaching series and all that available to you. And I would strongly encourage you to just invest some time in reading those resources and invest time in your children's life. Being aware of what is there waiting for them and what we can do as parents. It is very important. Parenting has always been a challenge, but I think it's more challenging today more than ever before. We went through some of the principles already. Principle number 1, and the greatest principle, is love your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. There should not be anyone that is taking up the space of God, space for God in you, even not your own child. And the second thing is, accept your child as God's masterpiece. Every child is unique. Every child is made for a unique purpose and a great purpose. Even the child with the disability, even the child with all the weaknesses you could count, that child also has a purpose in life. So, and that God has seen you as someone who would take care of that child, and he has seen you as responsible and worthy to do it, and that's the reason why he gave you that child. So accepting your own child as God's masterpiece and loving your God with all your heart, which helps you to love your spouse, and as a family unit to work together, it is very important. And principle number 3 is how important relationship is. We are trying to impart some truths into our children's life. For them to accept the truth that we say and the truth that we follow, we should have a good relationship with them. Truth and relationship are like 2 strands of a DNA. It should go hand in hand. If there is no relationship, even if you give them all the truth, it will only result in rebellion. And a relationship with no truth, it just causes apathy, disinterest. So truth and relationship should go hand in hand. And we are living in times where parents don't have a good relationship with their children because of many reasons. Busyness may be one of the reasons. Sometimes some of us are like so selfish and self-focused in our own achievements and goals, and we unintentionally neglect our children. Sometimes it's our bringing up, trauma from our past. Some of us haven't grown into the maturity of being a parent, relating to the child and being there as a coach, because we haven't gone through that experience in our childhood. There could be reasons, many reasons for that. But it is important to have that relationship with the child where even when they go through turbulent times, even when they test you, even when they have, unwanted or wrong behavior in them, you still keep your your emotions in keep and your emotions down, and be able to maturely coach them, right? So truth and relationship is very important. Principle number 4 is be intentional. Like, there are different types of parents. Some of them are really engaged parents. Some of them are ignorant parents, but then there are some parents who are very intentional in shaping their children, just like you shape the arrow. for a purpose, unique purpose. So be intentional in your child's life. If you want to know more about it, you could go to the previous sessions and listen to it. Last week, we covered 2 principles: addition instead of subtraction, and being tech-enabled, not tech-dependent. We live in an age where there are so many to choose from. There are so many distractions around, so many things that is not helpful. But at the same time, our children are living so empty lives within them. They're so lonely. They're segregated. Many times there is a void inside. So instead of pulling things away and taking away the phones and other social media and all that from them, if you add nurturing experiences into the center of the family, how it can push out some of the unwanted things from their life. That's what we discussed. And how we can be tech-enabled, not tech-dependent. Use the good side of the technology, but help them to have the discernment on how to use it wisely. Today, we're going to focus on principles 7 and 8, as time allows, disciplining without breaking, and developing a discernment over protecting the child. For some reason, okay. So let's start with the principle number 7, discipling without breaking. I wanted to turn your attention to Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6, and it's a very familiar verse for all of us. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. What is the real meaning of that verse? Training up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. The word that is used for train up, the Hebrew word is, I don't know how to pronounce it, hanak, which means dedicate or consecrate. And it also refers to the use of a bridle or bit that is placed in the mouth of an untamed horse. So you're training up your child for a very dedicated, consecrated purpose. You're dedicating your child, or you're separating your child for something. For that, you're bringing that child into submission to you and to God by putting a bridle in the mouth. You know, a bridle is put in the mouth. It's just something that kind of pull the horse towards you, or give the control of the horse to you. It is not like a yoke that that you place on the horse, or it is not like a pressure on the horse or a yoke, but it's just something that you use to control the horse. The horse has an inner desire to run. It is born to run, actually, but then you are using that inner desire. At the same time, you're controlling it into your way. You're bringing it under submission. And it is a very important thing to learn. I mean, it is a deep concept to understand. When you say training up your child, means training up the child for the purpose God has created him for, which is not your purpose. It is God's purpose, but you're doing it by bringing the child into your submission, under you. That's the meaning of in the way he should go. It is not something that we determine for the child, but it's the way for which he was designed by God. And also it says, train up a child. What is that time period of child? In the Bible, that same Hebrew word for child that is used in this particular portion is also used in 1 Samuel 4:21, Genesis 21:14, Genesis 37:30, and 34:5. And in these passages, we see it is used to refer a young infant. In Genesis 21, it refers to Ishmael. He was 15 years old at that time. In Genesis 37, it is a reference to the child Joseph, who was 17 years old at that time. And in 34, Genesis chapter 34, it is referring to Jacob's daughter, who was at the age of marrying someone, or marriageable age. So the meaning of child in the biblical perspective is until your child is ready to leave the home to marry someone. In biblical times, there was no teenage years. Either you're a child or you're a grown adult. There is nothing in between. Now we have this big gap where they're not adult, they're not child either. The other day, my son, I was actually preparing this, and he came to me and asked, Mom, why do you, he doesn't know any of this. He's just asking me a question that he has asked many times before. Why do you and Daddy treat me as a child always? And then I told him, because you're a child. Then he asked, who said that I'm a child? I'm not a child. Then I told him, Bible says you're a child. That's what I'm learning now. That's the reason why we treat you as a child. Of course, teenagers should not be treated as a child, in biblical times. By the age of 17 or 18, usually kids are married and they have started their family. Our children are inside our houses like much longer than that, right? So they should not be treated as children, but they should not be treated as adults either. They should still be under our submission until they are ready to start their own life. What is a proper training? What does it take to properly train your child? Sometimes we think living a good example or for them, and also taking them to church and being very religious and pious and devoted and loving and providing for the children. All that is that is meant by the word training, but it is much, much more, much beyond, much deeper than that. And that's what we're going to learn today. In spite of all these, being a good example and being born into a devoted family and having very loving children, parents who love each other and love God, some children doesn't turn out right. And what are some of the reasons for that? God always keep the promises, right? But there are other reasons why sometimes kids don't turn out the way they should. These are some of the reasons I put together from the resources and, in my personal experience. Number one, he or she does not know the Lord personally. And ultimately, I think that is the most important, or majority of the time, that's the reason why children fall away or depart. If they don't have that personal encounter, which only God can do, we can only be facilitators in their life to lead them to that. That is number one reason. Second reason is sometimes it's a lack of parental discipline. Many of us are like so permissive and protective. Especially, I have heard the story of a missionary couple. They were in a mission station, and their children, they thought these children are sacrificing a lot because they don't have the luxury of living in, a good country with all the resources and all that. So they were so much protective and loving and permissive, and never really corrected them or taught them the value of still being submissive to God and, the disciplining their life for the purpose of God and all that. So what turned out is both of them, they just became so self-centered, and they got married according to their interest and divorced. And it was such a tragedy in the family. So everything else is perfect in that family setting. Both are very loving parents. They love God deeply. And, children had ample opportunities to experience God's love and all, but the permissiveness, you have to bring that will into the submission, right? That strong-willed child, you have to break that will. And if you don't break that will and bring into submissiveness, they can go out of your hand. And the time comes when they feel like they're adults and they can make their own decision. The third reason is he has been allowed to feed the sins of the flesh. There are so much temptations out in the world. Even after all this teaching and disciplining and, praying for them and all that, we still need to check, who their friends are, check their backpacks, check what they're exposed to. It should be always in the back of the mind. Temptations are so big, and sometimes they willfully just decide to feed the sins of the flesh. Fourth reason, comparison to a sibling, not knowing who your child is. Each child has different personality, temperament, different unique nature. Some are self-willed, who is so hard to discipline, or they can't stay disciplined. They cannot finish their work because they always want to gratify their other desires, and they can never be, willed enough or set a goal enough to finish their work. So it could be a self-willed child, or it could be a strong-willed child, which really need a different strategy to discipline and to train, right? So not knowing who your child is and comparing to a sibling. Maybe the first sibling was a rule follower, very calm and quiet personality, was a good kid, admired by everybody. The second one seemed to be a little bit more strong-willed, totally opposite personality. And you compare that child with the older one, you're making a big mistake there that could turn out to be a really bad situation. So never compare your children. Fifth reason, overprotection and lack of discernment. We will cover that today. How we have to develop discernment in our children rather than just to protect them. Sometimes when you overprotect, it turns to when they get the freedom, they don't know what to do, and it turns into a tragedy, or they go into traps. Sometimes it results in rebellion. Some overprotected children are so fearful that they can't even make a decision on choosing a partner or choosing a career or anything, because they have always been sheltered so much, and which is a problem in our Indian community. Sixth reason, they have not developed a spirit of submission, not breaking the will. Seventh, he's struggling for affection and attention of his parents. Sometimes, we don't validate our children's feelings. We don't even understand their feelings. We only see the outward behavior, not knowing what is inside. Sometimes we do the opposite thing, not giving the affection and the attention they need, but always correcting them, always being that business parent, right? So you have to balance it. And as we discussed earlier, like if there is no love, and if it is just the truth and disciplining, it could lead to breaking their spirit and rebellion. It could do the opposite effect. So in training up a child, the approach we need to take, should it be behavior oriented or should it be heart based? Many times we are so focused on behavior. We want to change the behavior, right? Which is great. I mean, that's the end result we want to see outside. But sometimes just focusing on the behavior is not going to do any good long term. Behavioral oriented techniques are usually based on rewards and punishment. If you finish your homework, I'll let you play. Clean up your toys and you could have your snack. Or you would say, if you don't do your work, you can watch TV. Or if you're showing this disrespectful attitude towards me, I'm going to take away your iPad. Those are some things that we say in our home atmosphere. Of course, it will do some good for a while, but, long term, children are not learning some of the qualities that we want to see inside their heart. And many times it leads to just selfishness. Now they're doing something to get something. So what is in it for me? That will be their attitude. Or what am I going to get if I do this for you? Or what's the minimum I have to do so I could get this reward? Initially it might be a candy or a cookie or playtime or something, but as they grow, it will keep, growing into bigger and bigger things, right? They will start bargaining with us, and then we will start threatening them. And it just, doesn't give us the end result that we are looking into. Transformation is the heart of the heart is what we want to see, not behavior modification. For that, we need to know what is in the heart of a child. There are many things in the heart of a child. We all have, Bible says we all have desires in our heart. We have emotions in our heart. We have beliefs in our heart. We have convictions in our heart. So where to focus? It should be a balance between, one side, there is a lot of desire and emotions working. The other side, there are strong convictions and beliefs working. If the desire is overtaking the conviction, even though they know what is right, they're going to go with their desire, or they're going to go with their emotion, right? So setting a boundary and knowing when they cross the boundary, what is happening? Is it based on emotion? Is it based on some of the desires of the flesh? And leading them back to conviction is what would help us to bring the transformation in the heart. For that, we need to know what is an attitude. Attitude is what we see externally. right? Attitude, we say, you have a bad attitude. You have a very disrespectful attitude. It is a window into the child's heart. It is something external. It is a tendency that we see. And many times we think children will grow out of it when they get older. A 1-year-old saying no, right? We don't take it very seriously. A 3-year-old screaming at you, calling you names. Sometimes, some parents just ignore it, thinking that when the child gets bigger, he or she may get a better understanding about it. But children never grow out of it. They grow into it. Susanna Wesley, she said, a child's self-will need to be broken before the age of 2. She had 2 children who shook the world. They probably was very strong-willed kids, John Wesley and Charles Wesley. For them to be that strong personalities used mightily for God, she probably went through that phase in her life where she just didn't know how to bring this child into submission. So children never grow out of attitude, they only grow into it. You have to just, find it early on and act on it. An attitude is a pre-packaged response to a trigger. You can anticipate, some bad attitudes sometimes. It doesn't happen in a new setting. It only happens in a setting that you have experienced before. If you haven't gone somewhere, you don't know what to expect, and you don't have an attitude about it. But if you have gone somewhere, then you would have an attitude about either being happy to go there or not wanting to go there, right? The same way, it is a prepackaged response to a trigger. And sometimes I can be a trigger. I said so. I told you to do it. The minute that you say it triggers a response, a bad attitude. It just goes, it escalates things, right? It causes so much trouble. So there are triggering situations in the family where you could anticipate, a bad attitude. Sometimes there are like high conflict relationship within the family itself. We have 4 children, 2 of them don't get along well, and you could anticipate, some real tension when they are together. So there are things, there are patterns you can identify. And you may have to work with both kids individually, separately, to correct that attitude to bring the result that you expect. What are the 3 components of attitude? There are, first of all, there is a behavior. Behavior is what you see externally, the face, a sarcastic remark, or stomping down the hallway, or whatever they do outside is the behavior. And then there is emotion within your heart. Emotions are feelings inside the heart. Sometimes in children, they don't know how to express their emotion. They don't have a vocabulary to express the emotion. So they might be disappointed. They might be lonely. They might be fearful. They might be stressed and overwhelmed, but it comes as anger outside, right? So they don't know how to express the emotion unless you teach them emotional vocabulary. And the third thing is the thinking error. Thinking error comes from beliefs that reside in the heart. Okay, chores, they're not my responsibility. It's mom's responsibility. If you have if that is your conviction, you're not going to do, no matter how much the parent would ask the child to do, he or she would not do it. So there are thinking errors. My brother is annoying. And if you have that belief within you, every time you see your brother, you're going to just attack, right? So those thinking errors need to be corrected. So attitude is a combination of all 3, of having a thinking error in your heart, and an emotion or a feeling inside, which is coming out as a behavior. Now, how can you, based on these, this understanding of what an attitude is, how can you really discipline your child proactively and correctively? This is actually from Biblical Parenting University, which is really good, like for younger kids. If you have gone through the curriculum before or used it, or if you want to use it, for younger children, it's really helpful. So this is like a little portion from it, but it's very in-depth and detailed. So proactive and corrective disciplining. Being proactive and, is always better than being corrective. I'm a family physician. We always focus on preventive medicine, right? So if you can prevent meltdowns, if you can prevent tension in the family atmosphere and train the child to avoid problems, that is the best way to do always. Now, how can we be proactive in our disciplining. Suppose you have a major problem here. Suppose, your son is going to a friend's house. When he comes back, you see that he has a problem with his sister. And this is a pattern. Every time he goes to the friend's house to play, he comes out with a bad attitude, comes back with a bad attitude. So you have two options. One is to avoid the situation, don't send him into that house anymore, because it is causing some bad attitude or behavioral changes in your son, right? The second option is to teach the discernment and teach them to guard their heart, no matter what the external influences. So you could have a conversation. Son, I'm seeing this behavior change in you. You're not the same way when you come back. What is happening there? Why there is a change? What are you guys doing there? We have two options. One is, I decided not to send you there. The second option is, you could decide what you're going to do no matter what your friend tells you. You know who you are. You know our family values. You know who we are, what we follow. And if you can tell me that you're going to guard your heart and don't let anything come inside of you, then I could send you there. And you could observe that child and see what happens the next time. Proactive disciplining, works. I mean, it's something that you sometimes do at the moment of correction, but it is done in a way that to prepare the child for, the same, when he go through the same experience. And it actually builds some discernment, convictions, some changes in his heart, right? Through that experience. So you're using a crisis moment as a teachable moment. The second way is, to help them develop an emotional vocabulary. I know you are disappointed because you could not go to your friend's house, but that should not make you disrespectful towards me. So helping them to express their emotion, but also letting them know that you have emotions in your heart, but that should not overtake your conviction. That should not lead to your behavior. We are supposed to do things because it is the right thing to do. It is not, it's not because you feel that way, but it is because it's the right thing to do. So every time when you have that conversation with the child, you're doing some coaching, you're developing some judgment, your brain is developing through all that, right? Correcting the thinking errors in the child is the third way. Again, we're actually working on these three components, that causes the behavioral change by understanding the situation, teaching them discernment, helping them to develop that emotional vocabulary and express the emotion in the right way, and also correcting some of the thinking errors. Filling their life with meaningful activities, especially in today's world. Our children are so lonely. They're inside the house, within the four walls. There is no way to communicate with each other than through the social media. If they're always on the phone because they're bored, because they don't have anything else to do, you haven't found any good activities, no matter how hard you try to take away the phone, they're going to just go back on the phone again because they don't have anything else to do, right? So as parents, instead of taking away that and punishing them for that and being brutal about that, suppose you invite the friends over, over the weekend, let them play together, find some opportunities to connect other than through the phone. You would need less and less of disciplining or punishment or these moments in life, but you would be filling their life with meaningful activities which will push out some of the unwanted behaviors. Knowing the teenage brain helps really to understand what's going on in their life and what is the importance of using these teachable moments to really, to bring the discernment and wisdom and convictions in them. You probably have heard about the teen brain. Teen brain develop in different speed. We have a front part of the brain, which helps us to process our thoughts, express it, our language, our executive skills are all in the front part of the brain, which is called the frontal lobe. And then there is an emotional part of the brain, which is the temporal lobe. So in teenagers, the emotional part of the brain mature much faster than the frontal lobe or front part of the brain. It takes up to the age of 25 years these days to have adequate, maturity or full development of the frontal part. And that's the reason why some of the major life decisions should not be rushed into, like, when they are very young. So because their emotional center is so advanced, they have a tendency to just react faster before they even think, right? Be slow to respond in anger, be slow to speak, and fast to listen. Bible says that, but they do the opposite because they don't have that patience, or they don't have the speed to process what they hear. But their emotions are so emotional center is so active that they react in emotion. And that's the reason why we should help them to express their emotion rather than acting on their emotion, and teaching them every time when this happens at the heat of the moment, calm down, what's going on? What is in your heart? What are you trying to do here? Are you okay? Just having that conversation, and you don't get into that emotional overwhelmed state, but you just keep yourself calm and talk to them, because knowing that would help you to understand them better. It's sometimes I think it is not the problem of just teenagers. It is the problem of society as general. We have gone back to primitive olden days. And I put the little, cutout or the picture of Neanderthal man here. He lived like, thousands of years ago. And you see the brain of the Neanderthal man, the prefrontal area is very, very small compared to our prefrontal area these days. Neanderthal man, they did not cultivate anything. They were not scientifically advanced. They didn't have all this information and technology and, anything to just improve their judgment and reasoning and, information and processing and all that. Basically, what they lived for was just to eat, and they hunt an animal. They see an animal, they have to immediately act on it. Like at that moment, it's like an impulsive reaction. They see a tiger, they kill the tiger, or they see a deer, they hunt the deer, and then, that's their meat, that's their meal, right? So they have to have that immediate reaction. For that, they used this temporal lobe. Their temporal lobe was so advanced. They just reacted based on what they see outside. And we can also sometimes be this like the Neanderthal man. We have a system 1 and system 2 in the brain. System 1 is operating based on the temporal lobe, which is our emotional center. I can give you an example. If I have a patient coming into the clinic, patient seems to be very upset, has an angry demeanor, and sometimes I get a little afraid of, why is this person so angry? Is he or she upset at me? Did I do anything wrong? I will be a little careful and a little fearful as I do the interview. But towards the end of the interview, I come to know that she is tearful, she's depressed, she's needing help from me. She wants me to help her and comfort her. But I totally had a wrong opinion at the beginning of the interview, because what I saw on her face was anger. But what was going on deep inside was depression. So if I'm the Neanderthal man, she's coming out at me, lashing, and in anger, I could react in an angry mood in return. Isn't that what's happening in our families and in our society and in our churches sometimes? We just work on that emotional center. We don't have a deeper understanding of what's going on. Our frontal lobe here is not developed enough, or it hasn't been taken over by the Spirit of God. This is exactly what Jesus was trying to accomplish in Peter's life. He was a very impressive person, but the Holy Spirit came. He totally changed into a new personality. He became the most humble man, right? And he got the meekness to lead the big flock of sheep. And that's where most of us struggle too. It's not the problem of teenagers. Unless we slow down, take a moment to process our thoughts, try to understand what in the other person's life, many of our marriage problems, many of our problems in our society would be corrected by it. So second part is corrective disciplining. So with this in our mind, now, how do we correct our children? Suppose we have to confront them. How do we confront them? When the brain is emotionally overtaken, when the brain has all this emotional surge, this is all based on hormones. Adrenaline is flashing. Some of the other hormones are flashing. The frontal cortex, where that judgment and reasoning should happen, it is not doing it because the emotional center has overtaken all other area of the brain. Many times the changes that we are trying to accomplish in the children, the new connections that we are trying to build, which makes them much more wiser, would be flushed away in this emotional heat. So try to avoid those moments, heated moments, meltdowns as much as possible. Try not to escalate things. If you already know this is going to trigger something, don't escalate it. If you're trying to work with a child and trying to accomplish some behavioral change, take a step back. You can confront directly, you should confront directly, but you should do it when the emotions are settled. Making an observation. Observe and run, mother. So you don't have to confront all the time. Sometimes, there are less serious things where you could say, oh, I watched what you said, or I heard what you said. It was unkind. I saw what you did. That was not the right way to do it. And then you can just walk away. You don't have to confront every time, so that you could minimize some of those, meltdowns and emotional heat and, the tension in the family setting. So if you're confronting, if you decide to confront, then choose the timing. Once you have calmed down, once your child has calmed down, then you sit down and have a talk, right? Don't get sucked in. Any teenager who is angry wants you to be angry with them. He wants to pull you into that boxing ring, and it would not do any good. Now you are equally guilty. He will say, no, daddy was angry too. Daddy yelled at me too. So we are equally wrong. So don't get sucked into that moment. Stepping back helps us to analyze the problem. Our frontal lobe starts to function again, right? All the emotions and the hormones have come down. Now we can understand what's going on. What triggered the response in him? What's going on with him? Maybe he's hungry. Maybe he's disappointed, or maybe, he's anxious. Maybe he's lonely. Maybe he had a bad day at school, or what's going on? And analyze the family dynamics and the whole situation. And it also gives you time to bring your anger under control. Sorry. Okay. Now, when you have to confront them, how do you confront? What happens routinely in a family setting? Sometimes, in the middle of that heated moment, you don't have that emotional stability to do that conversation in a calm manner. So it comes out as very harsh words, and in that emotional heat, they're seeing an angry mom, an upset dad. Sometimes it gives them poisonous message. It tells them that, okay, my dad doesn't love me. He doesn't care about me. But the reality is you do care, you do love them, and you want to give that message or send that message across, but it's doing the opposite effect. So out of the harshness, what usually happens is you're walking inside the room, and you're probably walking and yelling at the same time, not even looking at them. You're yelling across the room, and the child yells back at you. Sometimes it just causes so much of over talking and exploding and emotional intensity. And many times the expectations are not set clear. At the end of the conversation, the problem has only gotten worse. The gap between you and your child has only gotten deeper. There is a lot of emotional trauma that would carry into the next conversation, and every conversation would just go in the opposite direction, or it just go down. Instead of that, if you are speaking with firmness, where you have taken your time, you have scheduled a time, you're going to say, okay, I don't like what you did. We need to have a talk, but not right now. I need some time to think, and I want you to sit down. And when you are ready, let me know. I'll come and talk to you. And then at that moment, you're giving instructions clearly You're drawing a line. You're asking him what happened, his side and your side, and asking him to make a decision collaboratively. And also letting the child know, by stop doing it, what you're accomplishing. It's not just for today. Tomorrow, you're going to be a father. You will be working under somebody. These are some skills you would need in your future. You're just envisioning the child, and you're ending the conversation with a positive attitude and something to look forward to, giving them a hope. If there is always sibling disharmony, they're fighting with each other, you could tell your son, okay, when you know how to take care of your sister well, I know you're ready to be a husband one day. This is the time to really go through the training. So tomorrow you'll be ready to take care of your wife. So giving that perspective or a bigger vision would help your child to make that changes inside, because now they have wings to fly. You're not just killing their spirit by harsh words and using words. You always do that, accusing words, at the heat of the moment with all the emotions. You're destroying your child through the punishment and the words that you use. We talked about this already, so I'm going to just skip through it. Avoid the boxing ring. Do not talk immediately. Ask your child to sit down. Tell him or her that we're going to talk about this issue after you settle down, and separate the issue from the process. You could point towards the issue, not blaming how it happened or what was the circumstance, but you just need to get to the point. Okay, no matter what, I know you were disappointed, but this is not the way you should behave. What you did was wrong. What mommy or daddy did was wrong too. We both yelled at each other, so we're equally guilty. We should both change. So bringing that into the plate and being fair would help your child not to do it next time. And when you actually let them sit down, and take the time for you to prepare to talk to them, you're also leaving room for their conscience and God to work in their heart. When you ask them to sit down and wait for me and let me know when you're ready, we can talk, they're going to sit down, and their hormones have come down. They have calmed down. They would think, oh, what I did was not right. Maybe I should apologize to mom. So they may come to you and say, Mom, I'm so sorry. Even before the talk, they probably will come and apologize to you, right? So you're leaving room for their conscience and also for God to work. What do you mean by discipline? Many of us, think that discipline is just punishment or rewarding the children. It's not just punishment. There is instruction involved in it. 2 Timothy chapter 3, 16, 17. All scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. See here, there are so many things that's listed. The scripture is the way that God disciplines us. Scripture is the way that he trains us. And here, the purpose of the scripture is, not just correction, but it also say it is for teaching, it is for reproof, and it's also for training in righteousness. So true discipline involves instruction. It involves love. It involves consistency in following through. It is a combination of all that. All these verses. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Punishment, as I mentioned earlier, will destroy the self-esteem, but training will make them confident. So take time to observe, analyze the situation, see what's going on, validate their feeling, take time to listen to them, and come up with a strategy on disciplining. Disciplining without much love. I'm sorry, I'm wrong in there. Without much love always fails. Bible says, a bruised reed he will not break, a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. Your child is probably damaged, but he's not irreparable, right? You should not make it irreparable. You should fix the damaged part by careful disciplining. It's like stone carving. In James Dobson's language, it's like stone carving. You have to be very careful. You have to be very careful how you carve out a stone. If you have a wrong move, it sometimes would do the wrong effect, or it will lead to the wrong, it will chip out a stone and it will just destroy the whole thing you're working on. So you have to be very careful with each of the blow, each of the strike, what you do on your child's life. Should we probably stop here and continue next week? I'm going into a separate topic, even though it comes under disciplining. It is about angry and defiant child. Sometimes, there are some behavioral pattern which is coming from underlying skills deficit. Some children have ADHD, some children have behavioral issues, they have mood dysregulation, and those children should be approached in a different way. And sometimes it is a normal child, but has a motivational deficit, but it has turned into a negative pattern. How to break that pattern is what we're going to go through next. If you see a repeated pattern of anger and defiance, how do you break that cycle? Everything that we discussed so far would work with a normal child, but sometimes there are situations where none of the things that you're doing is not working, like none of them are being effective. So you have to ask yourself the question, is this a motivational deficit or is it a skills deficit? Kids with ADHD, they have executive skill deficits. I mean, their frontal lobe, in that prefrontal area where that executive skill is there, they're deficient in it. They have cognitive flexibility, language processing. These are big terms. I don't want you to just focus on that. Basically, changes are difficult for them. Transitions are difficult for them. Sometimes it takes longer for them to process their emotions. They can be very impulsive. They don't have the language or the social skills to show empathy and see what's going on the other side, or even express their emotions. They don't have the words to express it. So there are so many things going on in their life. So there could be a skills deficit, right? You have to be more patient. You have to adopt a different style. Now, as a parent, do you hold excessively negative views about your child? Sometimes it's so easy not to like your child. You love your child, but you don't like them anymore. You can get into that mode where you just hate them, absolutely. And no matter what they do, you find fault in it because you hate them inside. So is that the situation? Do you have a history of being maltreated or neglected as a child? I have seen, especially for men, to be in this group. Some of them have been maltreated or they have been criticized all their life. They have been compared with their sisters all their life. And now they are an adult as a father. They're not confident. They don't think they have grown. They don't think they're accepted. They're looking for approval and they're transferring it on the child. And by punishing the child excessively or exerting control over the child, they get an inner satisfaction of being somebody, and it's just aggravating the problem. So after asking all these questions, now first thing that you need to do is repairing the relationship is number one thing. That's what we learned. Truth and relationship should go hand in hand. Any truth without relationship would only lead to rebellion. So how do you repair the relationship? Banking time is a technique that we can do, which is basically spending 15 to 20 minutes a day, at least three to 5 times a week with your child. Just let them take the lead, passing the ball, talking to them, joining them in gaming if they're playing video game, taking them out for dinner. Do something where you're not, talking to them, asking them questions. You're not commanding anything to do. You're basically spending time to build a relationship up. You have to fill their bank with the emotions that they need. And I mean, it's an emotional bank with the love they need and the time they need so that you could make some withdrawals. And especially when it is a child that has behavioral issues, you would have to make so many withdrawals. Every time you try to correct, it's a withdrawal from the account. So you have to fill the account. You have to have that banking time. I wanted to mention Susanna Wesley again. Susanna Wesley, in her book, it says she used to spend 1 hour per week. She had 19 children, 1 hour per week with each child. And when the children graduate and went to college, she used that 1 hour to pray for them. You could understand. She was you could only think if she had 2 strong-willed children, she probably was a strong-willed mother too. She made sure that she achieved her goals and she relentlessly worked toward it, right? So when your strong-willed child or you use your will, come and bring it under submission and use it for God, you become a big powerhouse, right? So those children are a blessing. You just need to turn them around and bring it under submission for God. So never make too many withdrawals. There are 3 pathways or 3 things that could happen. The first thing is we can force our concern, and we could say, no, you're doing it all the time and this is not accepted, and it only lead to escalation and meltdown. And that's one pathway. The third pathway is you can drop expectation and just accept the way they are and say, I give up. I'm not going to try anymore. And the third pathway is working on cognitive skill. That we talked about it already, taking your child's concern seriously, taking your child seriously, preventing meltdown as much as you can. Sometimes you can drop. Of course, you need to drop sometimes so that you can prevent the meltdown and focus on banking time and restoring the relationship, and when the relationship is at a better place, you start working on the cognitive skills. And the cognitive skill is just what we discussed through, like you're sitting down, talking to them, listening to them, getting your children's concern on the table, your concerns on the table, being respectful throughout the conversation, inviting your child to collaborate, come up with a plan. What would you do next time if it happens? What are some things you could do so you won't get into this again? Every time when you do it, a kid with a problem with their executive skill functioning, you would have to do it repeatedly, but every time when you do it, you are coaching them, you are developing their brain, and over time you will see an effect. Okay. We will cover the last two principles are very small principles. I mean, there's nothing much to cover. We can cover, go through it easily. So I'll address the three next session and we'll wrap up. If you have any questions.